Hello and welcome back to our Substance Designer series on creating this procedural rocky material. And so in the last video we left off creating the height map that you see here, and we were in the process of taking this and creating a normal map from this. So let's continue on. So here is the map that we have thus far. Again, this is our height map. And so here in this section is where we're going to start to work on our normal map. So we're going to take this height information and we're going to generate a normal map from that. And we can do that very easily. So here I just have my normal node. So if I just double click, we'll just load this here into the 2D view. If I hit the space bar, my operational nodes, we have this normal node here. And so this normal node allows me to input a height map, and it's going to generate a normal map from that. And here we have our normal format where we can work with OpenGL or DirectX, and we have an intensity slider here. So in this case you can see that I've adjusted the intensity slider and that I have this normal format set to DirectX. Just a tip with working with normal maps here in Substance Designer. By default, Substance Designer is utilizing DirectX. And that's going to be the same, that's going to be true for the Mac platform as well. It's just, the orientation of the normal map itself. So if you want to change that, you could switch this to OpenGL, but what you need to do then is just come over to your material. If I go to edit my material, you're also going to have this DirectX normal value here. So in all the materials, it's enabled true by default. So if you're working in an environment where you need OpenGL, just know that on your material, just come over to your DirectX normal and just change this from true to false, and then you can just work OpenGL. Okay, so going back to this normal format here, you can see that we have our normal map. Now, reviewing this, we actually see transparency. So when we feed in a height map into this normal map, it generates transparency values like this, which can be kind of annoying. So here in our 2D view, if I just come over to my enable alpha in the image, I'll just turn this off. And so here is the normal map that we created. Now let's go ahead and view this normal map that we've been working on thus far here in our view. So I'm just going to just hover over the node, right click, and just drag and drop here into my 3D view and just switch this to normal. And so now this allows us to check the normal map that we have thus far. So in this case right now we're looking at a few things. We're looking at normal, height, and ambient occlusion at this point. So here in just a moment we'll go ahead and change this. But for now you can see that this is what the normal map has created for us. And so we have our large shapes, our small shapes, we have our detail, we have our variance here in the cracks and so on, and so this is looking pretty nice here. Now there's another portion of this, because at this point with our detail, even though we have some small information or small form here, small shapes, and we have some detail here on our edges and stuff like that, it's still very, very flat. And so I want to utilize this hard shapes, or this large shapes as well. So here if we take a look at this normal map, you can see that I've generated some varying shapes here. And so now I just want to show you how I did that. So here I'm just going to come over to this large shapes section here of my graph, and let's talk about this. Alright, so here I just utilized one of the variations of my cracks node, and I pulled from this here the pattern itself. So remember with my cracks node I have a cracks pattern, and then I also have this pattern here as well. And so to create the large shapes, what I did was I created this blend node. So if we take a look at this, and I took the blend node and I did a blend operation. So I'm using a max lighten mode here, and I'm blending the pattern here from one cracks instance to another. So if we just scroll all the way up here to the very top, we have this pattern, and here let's just back out again. Well, here let's do this. Let's just come over here to our foreground. So we have this pattern and we have this pattern, and then we're blending these together using the max lighten node. So here we're getting these grayscale varying values that we're going to use to create these large shapes. Okay, so the next stage of this is to go ahead and blend on top of this our cracks. So here I took that same blend where I took my two cracks together like what we had shown in the previous video. So let me just back out again. We'll zoom all the way up. And remember how we were utilizing the cracks from the blend here. Now in this case, what I could probably do is just, instead of just making that connection, I could have just reused it from here if I wanted, but I didn't like how that line was crossing into here. Just also in my case, I'm not, this isn't any more or less optimized. I'm just, I guess more concerned about readability of the graph at this point. So I'm going to come in and I've got these two guys, these two line patterns here blending together. And then we're just going to add these guys together. So here you can see that we're just multiplying. So remember, back in one of my previous videos, I talked about this pattern here and how this pattern needed to be warped so that when we blended these guys together, it would line up. Here's the case where we're kind of blending these together. So we have our pattern and we have our lines over top of that. Now, the idea with this is I'm just getting a pattern and I need to start to generate some shapes out of this. And a good way to start to generate some shapes that we can use for this is utilizing the Bevel Node. So the Bevel Node can actually be found here in our library. So if you just start to do a search for Bevel, you'll see that we have the Bevel Node. This is part of Substance Designer 5. And so here I'm going to take my pattern, here's our pattern, and I'm just going to blend that here, or excuse me, actually input this here into the input of the Bevel Node. And then I just adjusted some of my settings, my distance, my smoothing, and so on, till I get this kind of pattern. So if we zoom in, the idea that I'm kind of looking for is to create these type of patterns. So you can see that we have kind of like these slopes here, and you can see that if we look, we've got this kind of white line like this, and then we have these slope patterns, and this is kind of the start of creating some kind of rock patterns for me. So again, I'm kind of thinking of these rock patterns, but I want to think of them in terms of larger shapes. So I started with this shape. So again, remember, like I'd said in one of the earlier videos, I start small, I start with shapes, and then I start to modulate those shapes into more complex shapes, and then little by little, node by node, we build this up into the actual effect that we need. So here we have this shape. Now I need to kind of flatten some of these areas because I like this line that we have here, and I like this kind of this face fall off that this is giving us here, this slope. But this is kind of all coming to a point. And so what I did was I then utilized a levels node. So I just took my input white and just pulled it down a bit so that I could flatten some of this out. Also to kind of increase some of this value in here. And so now that I have this, it then comes time to produce some variation of this. So again, that's kind of a part of my common theme. Small shape leads to a more complex shape. We then vary that shape, and then we blend everything back together again. So that is kind of my workflow. So I took this levels node and then just applied a transform 2D. Just rotated and just moved it out of the way to get this. So here's what we have. Here's one version of it, and then here's another version. And then I just blended these guys together using this add mode, and then adjusted the opacity somewhat. And so the idea is I'm just trying to kind of merge these shapes together. So we start to get some interesting patterns, like in here. So here you can see where these slopes are kind of converging here. This big white area, this all becomes one, kind of single flat plateau. Just some interesting patterns with that. Looks a little crazy right here, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about it at this point. So what I'm going to do next is just produce another levels node on top of this. And so the idea of this levels node here is that, and you can see that all I did was I took the output black. Here it is. If I just pull this guy all the way back here, what I'm trying to do with this is I'm trying to just close the gap, so to say. If we kind of look here, we've got these real dark black areas, and I don't want there to be such a void in these areas. So I took this levels node and then just took my output black, and we just moved it up, to something around, let's say, this area like this. And so now when we take a look at how this is blending, we get some nice patterns. So here in this area that was kind of looking a little weird for us, now look at the shape that we're getting. So here's this shape. We've got this kind of nice flat area here. It kind of falls off. So we get these nice kind of rock shapes. Everything's kind of blending together. Here's another nice little shape in this area, and so on. And so now that we have this becomes my large shapes. And so now that we have the large shapes, we'll just move all the way over here back to our normal, and we just use the normal map node. That was our height map. We just used the normal map node to generate this guy. Then we use a normal combine to place the large shapes with the small details and the cracked lines. So we combine these. Now we have several normal utilities. So here in my library, if I just do a quick search here for normal, I use a lot of these guys. So here you can see that normal color, normal combine is what we're using now. But there's several normal map utilities that you can work with. So we've combined these guys together here. Now this section right here, we're going to ignore for right now. If I just double click this guy, actually here, let me take a step back. Let's go ahead and look at this. Now I'm going to take this, just right click, drag and drop, and now let's take a look at the difference that we get. So huge difference in the normal map of what we had there. So this becomes, a lot better in the type of effect that we're trying to create. So, here's what we had before. We'll go back to normal. So we do have some nice detail, but very flat, not very interesting. Now adding in the large shapes to this, now we get this on top. So this looks, a lot better here. And so like I said, the next normal nodes in here, so we're doing another combine. We're going to ignore this because this right here is, and we're going to come back to it actually, but this is just removing kind of the water area. So this becomes kind of the first node we run into where I start working with this water. Now the way I did the water was, I actually did this last. So I had everything done, and then I was like, okay, I really want to put these kind of water puddles in here. So then I came up with the way to do that. So I did that last. And I'm actually going to cover that, near the end of the process. So I'm kind of going to go through the process that I followed myself. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. We'll come back to it. We're really going to hit kind of like our core material first, and then we'll get into that secondary water material. So for right now, we're going to ignore these nodes. And let me see what else we can work with. Okay, so the next thing that we have here is Pebbles. All right, and so now we're going to talk about our Pebbles. And here is our Pebbles. So let's take a look at this guy. So Pebbles was another thing that I wanted to add to this graph here. And so instead of, like I said before, kind of handled it like I did with the cracks, I just broke this off into its own graph. So let's take a look at our Pebbles. So I'm going to double click the Pebbles here to open up this graph. And this is a fairly simple graph. Let's take a look at this guy. All right, so for now, right now, it's being driven by this mask. And so this right here is input mask, and I have it set up to where I can just drag a mask in once it's instanced. So for now, what I'm going to do is just come back over here to uniform color, and we'll change this to grayscale, and we'll pull this guy all the way up, and we're just going to kind of feed this in right now so we can kind of see what we're working with. All right, and we'll set this all back here in a moment. So let's just double click our output and look at like what we're actually outputting for this. So what I did here was I utilized one of our tiling nodes. So if we come over here to our library, and I'll start to type in tile, we have a nice node here called the tile sampler. And what this will do is it'll take some kind of input and just start to tile it. Here, I'll do tile sampler. So here it is. And so here with my tile sampler node, I've just gone in, and let's just double click and take a look at what we have. So here is another good prime example of what I was talking about, several times throughout the video, is that we start with these shapes, and then we start to refine the shapes until we get this complex shape that we need to use. So tile sampler, I just came in and used the paraboloid pattern to create this, and then I just went through some of the pattern, just some of the controls here, like size random and scale, and just to kind of rotate and move these things to, basically where they're just kind of scattered all over the place here. And there's different ways you could do this. I could have used I could have utilized the scatter node and so on. I wanted to utilize tile sampler because it has this mask map input. I could also, like I said before, have a pattern input. So let's just say that you actually had like maybe you use the SVG node to draw out an exact rock pattern that you wanted to use. That's another option that I've utilized before, because for me it was just kind of easier to draw out that pattern than try to procedurally generate this pattern that I want. And then you can put that pattern in. Here's the pattern input. And so you can also, like I said, we want to be able to utilize this mask map input as well. So finally, just running through some of these settings here to get the pattern to be varied like this. Then we go back to slope blur again. So here I started with that fractal sum base, ran the levels on it. I think what I actually did was just copy and pasted the fractal sum and the levels that I had in the last graph and just pasted that in. and then just ran the slope blur on it. So let's zoom in and take a look at what we have. Recall here our samples is up to 32. This time my mode here I've placed to max. So this time I'm using the max mode. Here's what it looks like with the min mode. So it's just kind of cutting into this a little bit too much, I think. Let me just kind of back out of it. I don't know. Maybe I like this better now that I kind of look at it. Yeah, these are a little bit more rounder. Here, let's see again what I did. Let's look at it under max. Hey, let's try it. Let's go back to min because I kind of like this is retaining. I think actually, like I said before, I usually use min most of the time, and so I'm not really sure why I had that set to max. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm going to keep this at min for now. Because what it does is utilizing that kind of round paraboloid shape, and then utilizing here our slope blur and our levels, we're starting to get these crisp edges like this again, this nice kind of sloping fall off for these faces. Like if we look, this could be like a face, this is another plateau face here, and so on, and this gives us a nice kind of rock type pattern pretty quickly. Here's another one that looks pretty good, and so on. So now that we have that, let's come back up to the top here and let's blend this guy in. And so then what I did was I took another one of these. So again, we have to just kind of vary this even further. So let's just kind of back out with this guy, and I took the cell pattern here and just did a transform just to kind of rotate and move it around, just scaled it a little bit. Then we're taking this cell pattern here and we're subtracting it, to get these kind of, just to kind of work on these rock shapes and just kind of, and just again, just vary it some more. So here, let's just adjust some of my opacity. Let's pull our opacity back down. So maybe this time I think I might actually scale it a bit more like this. And we can come in and start to actually go back to our cells. Let's just check our distance. So here I might increase my distance a little bit more. Just making a few settings here on that, the distance and the disorder for that cells node. And you can see how it's kind of varying my rock patterns here, my little pebbles, as we work through this. And so now that I have this in place, the next thing that I did was I just needed to go into levels, just to kind of just clamp some of the values some and just increase some of these values here. So we get some stuff like this. And then I just kind of output this here to my mask. So the idea is I have, some of these little bitty, these spots like this. I just kind of left these. These are just like, little bitty pieces of something here in the ground. But really what I'm really looking to create are these kind of round, these pieces here. And if I go back, maybe that's what I was utilizing with that. Let's just check it out and see. If I go back to this slope blur, and let's change this back to max. Yeah, it's just flaring out too much. I should have had that at min. That's better for what I want to do. So now we basically just kind of have this pebbles here. If I just double click to go out to my input parameters, here I have some X and Y amount. Basically what I'm doing with that was I just came over to the tile sampler node and then just exposed that X and Y amount values so that I could just vary this when I actually import this into the stones graph. So let's go back here to our stones, and we'll zoom in to that pebbles area. So here it is here, and actually at this case you can see where we're losing some of our values. So let's go back to these guys here, and let's just right click and drop this guy into base color, and again drop this guy here into our roughness. There we go. And we'll just come back to where we had our pebbles. So here's our pebbles. Now for the mask input for that, so actually I have that all set to white. I forgot to set that back. Let's go back to our pebbles. So notice right now when we did that, you could see that the rocks are just everywhere. They're being spread everywhere. And kind of my thought on that was, on these high areas like this plateau, this flat kind of area here, I don't want to place a rock here. I didn't want rocks on top of that. I really wanted them just kind of down in these kind of these sloped down values and stuff like that. So let's go back to our pebbles here, and let's replace our map input, and we'll just delete that guy out, and let's go back to our stones graph. I think we're going to need to reset our values again. So here I'll just grab this. I know this is my base color, and this here is my roughness. Okay, so we got these guys in place. And now you can see that since I'm utilizing that mask, that they're gone off these higher areas, and they're only really concentrating down in kind of the lower areas. And that's because I'm utilizing a mask to do that. Now let's take a look at this mask. So here's one part that I did. So this here is my blends. So this is, you know, my shapes here. Remember, this was the small shapes. This was the detail and the cracks. All right, and then I just inverted that. So if we look at this mask, you can see these white areas are going to be the high spots. So I just invert that. So now the high areas become the dark spots, and the lower areas become highlighted. So obviously all of our cracks and so on, these become, you know, lighter in value. And then I just, you know, clamp these values here through a levels. So this becomes the mask. So this mask is really, you can see, is now targeting all the areas that are not kind of these high places like this. All right, and then so we use that mask and we just plug this here into where our pebbles are going to be. And so this is where we get, and we start to accumulate these pebbles in the areas of where that mask is going to be. So like I said, where we last left off talking about our normal, actually we were skipping that area. We were talking about where we were blending our large shapes and our small shapes and so on. Then what we're doing here is we're going to combine back with that the pebbles. So the pebbles, I was outputting here just this as a height. So again, just space bar, use my normal mapper node. So here's my normal, and here's where the pebbles are. And here I can, you know, I actually cranked my intensity up to around 4, so I can make these kind of intense. And then I just use the normal combine again to get this here. Now, this normal combine is also utilizing this normal that we're not talking about just yet. Actually, I'm going to take this just uniform color here, this normal color, and just hit D to dock that. Remember, we're not talking about this just yet, so we'll come back to this. But if I just take this guy now and just show this here into our view, you can see that, you know, here we have our normals and stuff, but now it's actually taking into consideration this kind of water stuff. So like I said, we're just ignoring that for now, but now our pebbles are in place. And here you can see the pebbles and what they look like. So you can see how that technique again of you know, creating that shape and then utilizing that slope blur, and then how, you know, we're masking it here based on the mask that we utilize to generate our height information from, to place that into certain areas across the surface here. So kind of in the cracks in the lower areas. So the pebbles part, which I like, I think that's pretty cool because it adds just like a small kind of subtle variation to the overall surface that you're trying to create. And it gives, like I said, it's good to have these little kind of little varying shapes and stuff like that. Okay, so the next stage of this is I came in and it looks like what I did here was I just combined. So I had this normal effect and then I just combined it again. Okay, and the reason I did that was just to intensify it. So basically I just took a normal map and combined it over top of itself. So here, let's drag this guy in, and now you can see where that just intensified the whole normal effect. So I did that just because I wanted to take what I had and just intensify it even further. So this is going to make up our final normal output. So I just piped through this normal combine and then finally just passed this down to the normal output. So presently the normal map is showing the water areas, but we're going to cover that in depth a bit later. So for now, this will be a good stopping point for where we want to be here at the normal map creation at this stage.